Good morning. I'm talking to Tom Bass. I've heard you speak. You're a little bit unusual in the sense that you are a fabulous public speaker, number one. And then second off, I actually have had the rare opportunity to actually hear you talk. You're on the mortgage originator speaker circuit, and I thought you were just really great. You certainly, the day I saw you in Washington, you had your audience mesmerized, and that's
on one of those rare occasions that I see.
Yeah, you were up that day. I mean, you were really very, very good. And there's a core group of you guys out there. Greg Frost comes to mind, who are really articulate and have a message, to say. And I think that's important. I think you really bring a lot to the equation when it comes to helping train loan officers. I've always thought that it was never much of an ego trip. The ego was in putting a lot of money in your pocket and doing a good job. And I've always thought that people like yourself that get out there on that circuit really perform a valuable service to the other loan officers out there, and really encourage them to take these classes. They really don't cost very much, and they're a lot of fun. Anyway, why don't we just kind of start this way with everybody, just really kind of asking them, where they came from and kind of how they got in the business and where they went to school and whatever. So why don't we start there?
That sounds great. I'm basically from Southern California, born and raised in Southern California all my life, and was going to a local state college my sophomore year, when I just realized that either seniors were graduating and at that time not being able to find jobs, and if they did find a job, they were basically, getting paid somewhere between $30,000 and $35,000 a year, or seniors were graduating, couldn't find jobs, they continued to go on to continued education. And I kind of had an aha event when in the middle of a Western Civ lecture, in which I said, you know what, I don't need this. And so I basically looked at my buddies and said, I'll see you later. And they said, okay, we'll see you after class. And I said, nope, I'm out of here. And basically I walked out of college, and my brother-in-law, Tim Cahill, worked was a part owner of South Pacific Financial, and I basically said, hey, will you hire me on 100% commission? Don't pay me any salary, and I'll wait tables at nighttime to support myself. And so I got my introduction realistically at the age of about 20. I was 20 when I got in the mortgage business, and it's been an incredible 14 years from that day and that inception.
And that's pretty young to do it too, because one of the problems in our business that I haven't spoken about for a long time, probably a year and a half in an interview, but one of the problems is, of course, in our business that when a realtor loses a deal, they lose a lot of money. When a loan officer loses a deal, they don't lose that much, and so there is a bit of a disconnect there, and it's a real problem when a loan officer doesn't take that seriously, and where I'm really heading is the fact that when you start out in this business, it's not very helpful if you're 20 years old and look young, because they're entrusting their commission to you.
Yep.
In reality. So
and so if there's anybody who's listening, obviously, who's young, I mean, the only way that you're able to obviously beat your competition at that point is the good part about youth is that I had a lot of time, and so I was able to outwork my competition. And so, I was able to, be available to realtors at certain times of the day and of the night and of the weekends, and just really, I just outworked my entire competition. That's not how necessarily I try to do it now, because obviously after 14 years, some wisdom has come into play, and you learn there's obviously better ways of doing business. But when you're youth and you're young and you don't have that type of experience, I outworked everybody, John.
Well, you raise an interesting point real early, and that is there's a lot of loan officers that will listen to this that are young, and that's really not an area that I address too much. But there's a lot of business out there right now. We're recording this. Usually, I don't date interviews because they're supposed to be timeless, and to a certain degree, they are. But we have been in this huge refinance boom. It's December of 2002, and as you and I talked a little bit before we actually went on record here, I think there's a high probability it's going to continue, and in fact, maybe even interest rates will drop a bit more. But there's a lot of people getting in this business right now that are young and really don't know what to do. And so one of the things that maybe we could start with is what you specifically did when you were young and young and dumb and getting into business, and how you made it happen for you in the first year, for example.
Well, I tell you what, I would do it differently. Knowing, obviously, being able to look back on hindsight, what would I do differently?
Yeah, but that has value too, sure.
And the value would be is that I would go out if I was getting, fairly new in the business, and I would find who was the top producer, in the company or in the area. And I would go and try to become that person's executive assistant for at least, 1 to 2 years. Because what I know is that when young people come and work for me, what they learn during that 1 or 2 years as my executive assistant, is probably realistically worth 7 years of trying to do it on their own. And so I have a couple of people who come and they've worked for me for 1 year to 2 years, and when they go out on their own after that kind of that time frame, they are by far probably more seasoned as a loan officer than people coming out after 7 years. And then really the reason why is because they're thrown into a volume environment. They're learning what it is to run a pipeline of 40 and 50 fundings on a monthly basis. They're getting an opportunity to talk to so many people in a scripted environment that they're able to learn and practice. And really what they're doing is they're learning and they're practicing on my clients. And so that's what I would do.
There's historical precedent for this. It's kind of interesting that you articulated it that way, because historically, that's nothing more than a version of the old guild system in the Middle Ages, where you apprenticed yourself to somebody,
right,
and then after a certain period of apprenticeship, in whatever trade that you were going to be, then you went out and you kind of got certified, and that's the way the business was done. And
yep.
And there really is no difference, in what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there is. It's something we don't spend a lot of time talking about in the interviews, at least not to my collective knowledge. But there really is value in what you're talking about. I can't tell you how many interviews I've done. You probably chuckle at this since you've seen it so many times, where you ask somebody, well, how'd you get in the business, and how'd you get your knowledge, and basically they just really threw you out in the street and gave you a book and said,
sure,
good luck to you. Hope you come back.
Sure.
When you actually started off, you said that right now that you would do it a little bit differently. But what are some of the specific mistakes that you made early on that you might caution some of the listeners?
Well, the first thing I did is I looked at every single client as realistically as just a one-time relationship, where basically I did the transaction for maybe Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and once I got a 1003 signed, I was basically at that point worried looking for Mr. and Mrs. Jones and who was my next loan out there, versus taking on the concept of really understanding the client for life relationship. Boy, if I could have really understood the client for life relationship from day one, my past client database would probably be 10,000, today. Unfortunately, I went 7 or 8 years in the mortgage business only looking at each client as a one-time relationship or a one-time opportunity. So if I was to look back and say some of the mistakes that I've done is that I would start over. I would make sure that every Mr. and Mrs. Smith that I got a chance to do a home loan for, I would make them into what I classify as a raving fan. I would continue with that relationship, continue with marketing to that client even, well after the loan is funded and recorded, and probably build my business a little bit slower, but build it with just some strong client referral foundation.
When you talk about that, are you talking about realtors in particular, or? Well,
let's even say either realtors, but more importantly, let's just say that for every loan that I'm actually getting, or even even in the realtor aspect. But what I was just talking about is that let's take into consideration, you get a loan, and that loan is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I think the early mistakes that I've done is that I was so worried about trying to go out there and continue to try to get more and more production and not be so focused on making sure that Mr. and Mrs. Smith was going to be classified as a raving fan. And to so many loan officers, once you actually do a home loan, A lot of loan officers, think that the relationship with Mr. and Mrs. Smith after they've done the home loan is over with. And I say, I would have continued to market and build those relationships like I do today, but from the very beginning.
What specifically, since we're obviously getting right into it, what specifically, do you do that sets you apart from some of the others,
Sure. I basically break down my operation in 3 different areas. The first area that we need to understand is that we want to make every client what I classify as a raving fan. Now, the word raving fan, that word's now becoming kind of an old word, but 5 years ago that was kind of a new buzzword. But a raving fan is a person who comes through our operation to get a home loan, and when they are done with that experience, our goal is to have it to where they are just, inspired and motivated to share our company and our experience with their family and their friends. Okay? So we want to look at every person and make them a raving fan. The other part of our operation says, well, once they become a raving fan, we want to make them a client for life. So client for life says we want to continue to market and develop that relationship so that not only that the time I did that home loan, but I do every home loan with that client forever. And part of that service is help managing, obviously, their mortgage. So, we spend a lot of money and we spend a lot of time creating a database that markets to these people really in 3 areas. It's going to market to them what I classify as emotional marketing, and that would be where, hey, we're calling them on their birthdays, and we're mailing them a birthday card. We're calling them on their 6-month and their 1-year anniversaries. That's what I classify as emotional marketing. We do client for life events. In fact, this Saturday we have a client for life event where I've rented an Edwards movie theater. We do it every November/December when Disney comes out with their new movie, which I have 450 clients coming to that.
God, that's great.
So that's what I call emotional marketing. Then we do what we call image marketing, where obviously they're getting 1 or 2 pieces of marketing material from us every single month. And so when I say client for life, I really mean client for life. I mean that I want to be in a relationship with these people and do every home loan for them.
Well, who do you send out the marketing pieces yourself, develop them, or do you use somebody like the Turning Point? Or
the Turning Point is a great company. We don't use a Turning Point, but because we've created almost all of our own marketing system. But for a loan officer out there who doesn't have the financial resources and doesn't have the support team that I do, the Turning Point or companies like that where you can outsource kind of a turnkey operation is a phenomenal idea. Mm-hmm. We basically are in contact with our clients 21 times a year.
That's incredible.
Yep. And,
could I ask you what that 21 consists of? I mean,
sure.
I'm sure it's small and big things.
Sure. We divide our clients into 3 categories. We have what we call VIP clients, we have raving fan clients, and we have past clients. And we want to make sure that we reward our clients differently for how valuable they are to us. Every single month they will receive a postcard. A postcard system is something to where it's basically a picture of our team on one side, and the other side is whatever message that we want to type into that postcard for that month or that event. Okay? So once a month they're going to get a postcard. Every client will receive a birthday card. Every client will receive a quarterly newsletter. Our VIP clients will get special things 4 times a year. Those 4 times a year could be dinner gift certificates. A lot of times I'll mail them out a book. I'll mail them out maybe a gift certificate, or not a gift certificate, but we do a cookie arrangement once a year. We do, again, 2 major client appreciation events, which you just heard. One was the movie theater. Another event that we do is that we have a local AAA baseball team, and so I'll invite 250 people to a baseball game as an event that we do. They will receive their annualized phone call from us to basically go over their mortgage for the year. We'll do special cards, what I call seasonal cards. So they'll get a card in the beginning of the year for the New Year's. They'll usually get some type of a Thanksgiving or a holiday card. We usually do a 4th of July, some type of a 4th of July marketing piece. And along with a lot of market updates on their emails. And so we're constantly keeping our client updated upon what's going on with interest rates and market changes via email.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What kind of cost? Just as kind of a, there's an old saying, you got to invest money to make money, and I'm sure it's true here. What kind of cost do you think you incur in these different categories?
Sure. And I want to give Jeff Lake, a lot of credit, because Jeff Lake came to me, realistically about 3.5 or 4 years ago when I was talking, and he really helped me understand the value of a client. And Jeff was kind of coming to me by saying, Tom, what would you be willing to spend in order to make? And that's when I realized that there's one area that our mortgage industry, probably doesn't realize the value, and that's the value of a client. So we realistically will spend about $40,000 to $45,000 a year in just past client marketing. And again, that will be anywhere from all the stuff that you've heard to all the client appreciations and what goes on with that.
But if you were to break it down a little further on a per individual, you stratified your clientele into 3 different groups.
Correct.
What do you think you spend on your VIP? Obviously, you spend more on them.
Sure.
I mean, are we talking like $100? And
no, we'll actually spend just under $200 on a VIP. But you got to realize a VIP is somebody that we classify who basically gives us at least 4 to 5 closed referrals per year. So the question is, if you're spending, $200 on a VIP who's referring to 4 to 5 deals a year, obviously think about your revenue and your return on that investment.
Yeah, your ROI is
phenomenal.
It's off the charts.
Exactly.
And I think, not to put words in your mouth, I think that's your point, that you've got to invest money. Certainly initially too. I think a lot of young loan officers, when they get out there, they're really trying to cut corners and save the money. And in a lot of cases, they don't have a lot of money. Let's face it, when they start. But the reality of the situation is, when you invest your money like you're talking about, you're going to get an impact that far exceeds the amount of money that you invest.
And that's where you asked me the question, what would be some of the things that I would start over? And as I'm saying, I would have started the development of those relationships from day one. Where unfortunately, I didn't learn about developing relationships until after 7 years of being in the industry or in the business.
But I think to be a bit of a devil's advocate, I think there's a lot of loan officers out there, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that still kind of follow that. They really don't get it. They're like bouncing from one client to another. They don't invest the money. They don't get ACT or any kind of a database, and they just kind of bounce along, and they never kind of get to that next level.
So when you say the word a lot, as I have an opportunity to do a lot of national speaking as I go across the United States for different organizations, I wouldn't even use the word a lot. I would just say that you use the word almost the entire majority don't.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And, during obviously refinance opportunities, this is an opportunity where you really see the return of your investment. Because right now, we're going to have an opportunity, to realistically, as a single loan officer this year, be probably somewhere around 500 units this year. And all of those loans came to us in a referred environment, either our past client coming back to us or our past client referring somebody to us. And so there was no money spent in any form of direct consumer advertising, in order to execute 500 units this year.
That's incredible.
Right.
And of course, that's the point. I mean, that's the payoff for the hard work that you put in there. I mean, the only thing you feel bad about is that you didn't kind of figure the deal out a little bit earlier in life.
That's why I was saying, just imagine if I would have figured that out,
Hey, you were young and stupid, and I think a lot of loan officers are when they get in there. And I think part of that is the fact that the training programs that are available for young loan officers are pretty much non-existent, certainly from a technical standpoint. And as far as a mentoring...
They've come a long ways from when me and you started.
Pardon me?
But they've come a long ways from where me and you started.
Oh yeah. Well, I go back further than you, where literally they gave you a briefcase,
and that's how I was.
And said, "Hope we see you later."
Sure. Probably one of the greatest training opportunities out there for a young person to start from scratch is understanding Todd Duncan through Productivity School.
Right, and he's someone I actually haven't met, but have admired for a long time from afar. And most of the top loan officers that I talk to have all attended some of Todd Duncan's courses, and I would encourage anybody out there that's listening to this to invest some money and attend some of his seminars. I hear they're phenomenal.
He's been my mentor and my trainer. So
when did you start? Not to diverge too much, but he's certainly worth talking about. When did you start going to Todd Duncan's seminars and
that was really the pivotal point of my entire career. Was 7 years ago, absolutely. And so 7 years ago is when I realized, wow, I've been doing this entire business the wrong way, and there is a different way of doing business. And that's when my business basically went from about, realistically about 100 units per year, to where we've been averaging right at 425, units, for the last 4.5 years.
What was it that he said, if you can remember, that kind of captured your imagination and really kind of made you want to, go to a new level?
Sure. One of the things that probably the biggest difference was I had an opportunity to really start rubbing elbows with people, who all did these, mega production levels. So when I got a chance to be around, all of probably the top 1% of our nation, what I realized through Todd Duncan was there were some definitely common denominators that all of these top originators, kind of like success breeds success.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Obviously, top producers are going to hang out with other top producers, and so, through the Todd Duncan, organization, I got a chance to see these common denominators. One of the common denominators that I saw is that every one of these top originators were either coached or mentored by somebody. So that was a very interesting, that's an aha.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of them had a past client database that they understood the client for life mentality. The third thing was every single one of them started building a team underneath them so that allowed the loan officer to go out and stay in what I classify as a proactive stage, 80% of their time versus being drug into daily operations. Okay? And probably the fourth thing, which I think is probably one of the most critical points, was that they really, Todd taught us to understand about how to create a vision. And in creating the vision is where, you understood, hey, great minds are going to hang out with great minds. Top producers are going to hang out with top producers. And so, through creating the vision and through the Todd Duncan organization, I got an opportunity, to start hanging out with, $100 million producers. Well, once you start hanging out with these people, obviously your belief window and your belief ideas, now go to those levels.
It's kind of funny, as you correctly pointed out, when you're young and you don't have that kind of situation, you get kind of intimidated. But once you start, as you say, hanging around and talking to people that are your age, walk the same way you do,
yep.
And all of a sudden they're doing 3 or 4 times the volume that
yep.
you're doing,
yep.
then all of a sudden it looks like it's possible.
Very possible. And I think that's what I realized when I got a chance to start hanging around these top producers. I just realized, these men or women were, no more educated than I, didn't have anything special or anything different than I, The only difference was that, they understood how to put it together. I was trying to make it through hard work. They were making it obviously work, through systems and through smart work. And that's when I realized, here's, Jeff Lake out there, doing 3 and 4 times the volume of production that I was. I was working 60 hours a week, and Jeff was working 30 hours a week. I was trying to make 6 digits. Jeff was saving 6 digits, okay? I was trying to take a weekend off with my family. Jeff was taking 5 weeks off of a year. And so when I realized my model versus his model, I realized there was something wrong with my model.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say someday I'm going to get around to interview him because I've done a number of interviews where people speak very, very highly of him. I understand he's very dynamic.
Well, but the story could be Jeff. It could be Barry. It could be Greg. It could, I could throw any name out there, and it's kind of a broken record. It's just because they all, they understand what it is to build the systems and the dynamics underneath them in order to support them while they go out there and create production.
Was Todd one of the first people that really kind of laid it all out, that this was that you needed a system of sorts?
I don't know if Todd was necessarily
or did he confirm it, maybe?
I think Todd, where the value that Todd had a chance to bring in was, a little bit out-of-the-box thinking. More importantly, Todd was probably one of the first people who was able to bring, top originators together, where ideas were obviously, shared amongst each other, where relationships started to grow. Obviously, Todd is a brilliant man in himself, and so obviously he was, was able to bring obviously some, ideas and systems together. And changing the dynamics of what an originator is today versus the originator of old. Like you said, before we were given a box of business cards and go get them, Tiger. Where today, it is definitely set up. I mean, it's a business strategy, it's a business development, it's relationship driven. It's not about how many hours to put in a single week, but it's obviously it's task driven. It's making sure that every opportunity, and every move that you're doing is putting you in a position to get the highest payoff activity every single day, every single minute.
Do you do things like time blocking? Maybe you might address some of the specific things you do.
Well, see, time blocking to me is not as important as I think that some people have put it. What I've learned is this, is that if any loan officer right now was to simply measure their time in 15-minute increments, and they were to measure it for, let's say, 5 working days, what they would realize is that probably 80% of their day is spent in what I classify as a reactive activity versus a proactive activity. A proactive activity is an activity that you do that makes you money. Give me an example. Doing a mortgage consultation, that's a proactive activity. Doing a realtor interview, that's a proactive activity. Typing a 1003 or photocopying a 1003 is a reactive activity. So what you'll find is that most loan officers, again, are spending 80% of their time in a reactive stage. So instead of time blocking, I would encourage everybody to do more task blocking and say, how do you build a team underneath you so that you delegate almost every reactive activity to somebody else? And if you can ever get to the point where 80% of your day is spent in a proactive stage, your production will quadruple. So I think it's more important to understand proactive versus and reactive versus it is time blocking. Because we're in an industry that, you can't necessarily just block out just major blocks out of your time. There's too many things that happen throughout your day that interrupt, obviously, those events. But if you understand proactive versus reactive, then you can accomplish that goal.
Yeah, I actually have something I can add to that, but it's not from me. But one of the complaints I heard from a young loan officer, I was talking to him at one of the MOM seminars, and he kept whining about, and it really was at a certain level of whine. He said, I just don't have the money to do this, and I know I need help, and that's the way to do it and everything. And I did an interview, I guess it's been over a year ago, where it was a great interview, too. And he said, the person I was interviewing basically said, that's a bunch of crap. He said, I don't want to hear that somebody doesn't have the money to do it. He said, when I started, I had very little money. And he said, you know what I did? I got together with 4 other new loan officers, and we went out and we hired somebody, and we paid them $6, $7 an hour plus a little bit of an override, and we all used them to take some of the burden off. And I just thought that was a fabulous idea.
Yeah, I would not allow the no money, thought process to really come into play. If somebody has a clear enough vision and a strong enough drive, I've never seen a money issue come between, obviously, their dreams and their goals. So I wouldn't accept that either.
Let's talk about realtors a little bit. In terms of advice for some of the loan officers that are out there that have not been through a real dip, and of course I've been around a long time and been through multiple dips, and you've probably been through 1 or 2 yourself by now. But, at some point in time, the refi business, as you well know, can turn on a dime, and it can disappear pretty quickly. And it's hard for the loan officers out there in the particular time period we're talking to really believe it, because it's been going on for so long. But inevitably, the worm, does turn.
Absolutely.
And I just wondered if you have some advice for the new loan officers out there that have never been through one of these, and what they really ought to be concentrating on right now.
Sure. Todd Duncan, said something here recently this last year that I think has been kind of an aha, and I think it was influenced through some leadership from a gentleman named John Maxwell. And the statement that was made basically said when a relationship is built based upon 90% of essence, then the relationship only requires 10% form. Or let me do that in the opposite. If a relationship is built upon only 10% essence, and that relationship is going to require 90% form. And so when I look at the realtor situation, and I look at my best referring realtors, and the ones that I have the closest, business relationship, are the people that I've really found who are my friends. people who I've invested time with that I enjoy being with. We share similar values. We share similar commonalities. We share, similar dreams. It's he or she is the type of person that I would actually enjoy going to lunch with versus going to lunch and just saying, I got to just get through this, And so I would encourage loan officers out there right now that they get, if they're not developing some type of referral relationships, either through realtors or CPAs or financial planners or somebody, when this refinance market turns on a dime, okay, obviously they're going to be in trouble. And so I would encourage them right now to go out, start developing some of these relationships, find out who are the people out there that share some of these similar common values and common ideas with you, and start building those relationships again, one person at a time, just like I said about my Client for Life system. Find that realtor, make that realtor a rating fan, make that realtor a client for life. Invest in it, build the time. Don't go out there and try to gobble up 20 realtors or 10 realtors at a time. Build one at a time, and then have that realtor then refer you to another realtor. And then do a phenomenal job for that person.
Mm-hmm.
Then have that realtor then refer you to somebody else. And so really what I encourage everybody to do out there is build your business based upon a referral environment, both your past client and your referring sources. Okay? Because when they refer you to somebody, they're going to spend the time, obviously, introducing, selling you to this other person, so that when you get a chance to go meet this person, you're not having to sell yourself, you're having a chance just to build a relationship with that person.
Yeah, well, I think that's well put, and it's funny how ideas go back in time. The good old solid sales techniques, they never fall out of fashion, and Todd Duncan's comment on essence and form, actually that comes from, he stole that from Plato.
There it is.
I think it's in the allegory of the caves, I believe, is where he got it. But those things, these time-tested things do hold true. And, I'm kind of amazed. I said this before in another interview when you were talking about going out and talking to CPAs and attorneys and stuff like that. I live in a small town, a very historic town, but a small town nonetheless. And our top CPA in this town, no loan officers ever called on him.
Right.
That's amazing. He does my taxes, and that's why I know him. And he was telling me, he says, do you know anybody that, I can talk to? I mean, isn't that incredible? The largest CPA in town, and no one has ever called on him.
Sure. And there's just gods of that opportunity out there. And so here you do a phenomenal job for your client. You look at their tax returns. You see that person, obviously, you find out who their CPA is, okay? And you can even use Mr. and Mrs. Smith to say, can you do me a favor? Can you call your CPA and introduce me to your CPA? So now when obviously you make a phone call to the CPA 1 is expecting your phone call. Your client had a chance to tell your CPA, their CPA, what a great job that you did for them. And now when you get an opportunity to meet the CPA, now it's a warm call versus you doing a cold call.
Right. There's nothing better than getting fronted in. I mean, the worst thing is, you're right, you call that CPA up and it's like, who are you and
right.
and what do you want? And
Yep.
Versus, Tommy said that you'd be giving me a call, happy to talk to you.
That's correct.
And I think that's a great technique in terms of, expanding your client base. Let me ask you something, not necessarily to change directions, but from a technical standpoint and an operational one, too. How do you make things go, in quotes, in your business in terms of, do you take loans in person? What do you do after the loan is taken? What kind of process do you use that kind of brings value and saves you time?
Sure. Our operation is set up in a way to where I want to basically meet all of our clients face-to-face. Obviously, there's some organizations out there that, that they like to do them, via phone, via, Federal Express and Internet and the whole bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're a relationship-driven company, we want to try to meet with every one of our clients. It gives us an opportunity, again, to try to make that relationship go a little bit stronger and a little bit deeper. And so, one, we meet with all of our clients. We're going to go into the rating fan system, and in the rating fan system, that's when basically every one of my staff members or my processors, one of the things that they're asked to do is to make sure when they make an outbound phone call that they simply introduce it by saying, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Hi, this is Jamie from Tom Bass's office. Tom has asked me to give you a phone call. What we've learned is that that's a key phrase when Tom has asked me to give you a phone call. We found in the past to where If that phrase was not used, sometimes the client felt like, wow, I met with Tom, and now that we're signing loan documents, I never heard from Tom throughout that entire process necessarily. But when we've used the phrase that Tom asked me to give you a phone call, we've realized now the client basically felt like they heard from Tom 6 or 7 times throughout that process, and they feel that Tom was obviously highly involved, in every step of that loan. So going back on your question, we'll meet with everybody. We basically feel there's 3 major or 4 major, moments of truth in the raving fan, and that's going to be the intro. So after we get done meeting with the client, they're going to get, an introductory letter. We'll go out to that client, usually an introductory phone call. At that time, we order a box of cookies that gets sent to their employment. That basically, and as they open it up, a balloon pops out, and attached to the balloon is a tin of cookies, and it says, congratulations on your new home loan, or I'll say congratulations on your new refinance. That happens within the first 5 days of that process. We feel that it's a moment of truth when the appraisal comes in, and so we'll usually make an outbound phone call or an outbound email pertaining to the appraisal situation.
Mm-hmm.
We feel it's a moment of truth when the loan's approved, and we feel it's a major moment of truth at the time of signing loan documents. Because we're in California, we're an escrow state, we sign our own loan documents. We don't send them to an escrow company. At that point, we bring a large bouquet of flowers, and we get an opportunity, obviously, to give a bouquet of flowers to Mrs. Smith in that situation and kind of congratulate her. We make sure that when we're signing loan documents that the client realizes that now that we're signing your loan documents and your loan is closed and in funding, that doesn't mean that our relationship is closing. That means that we just started our relationship, and then that's when we get a chance again to share with them the Client for Life system about managing their mortgage, wanting to do their home loan, forever. And we just talk about that system there.
Mm-hmm. In Maryland, of course, in some of the eastern states, it's a different system, of course. In some states, you have attorney, settlement attorneys.
And so I think, but I still think, though, John, it's a moment of truth to show up at those signings.
Well, that's going to be my point. It sounds like you not only are there for every application, you're there for every escrow closing.
Or if I'm not here, one of my staff members are there, obviously representing myself in the situation. And so, I think it's important to bring a bouquet of flowers to that environment, okay, and and give that to those people.
Do you physically call on realtors anymore?
Absolutely. Yep.
Because you're doing 500 loans a year, which of course begs the question, where do you have time to breathe?
Yep. And calling on realtors right now, I mean, one of the things that we've done, throughout the last 2 years is that I do a quarterly realtor power lunch where I'll have 30, 35 realtors, show up, in which I'll put on a lunch, and in this lunch I'll get an opportunity to come and speak, to these realtors, and they'll give me an opportunity to, see everybody on a quarterly basis.
You know what I like about that? That one's real good, because what happens is I would think that these realtors are coming in, they're seeing all these other power realtors too, and they're seeing that connection to you.
Yeah, and so, one, they see the connection. One, they see me in a leadership role because, I'm going to speak usually for 45 minutes to 1 hour, on a topic situation. It allows these other realtors, obviously, to get some time with each other.
Mm-hmm.
We get a chance to share some ideas in that environment. We get a chance to share, hey, I got a new hot listing, or hey, I got a buyer looking for a situation. And we've seen quite a few deals come together, during that 1 hour lunch period of time. And so we do it. The power lunch has been, a phenomenal success for us. Again, going back on the area of essence, I have a lot of realtors which I have actually good relationships with, and so we'll do a lot of business seminars together, to where I'll take them to maybe a Brian Buffini event, or we'll go to a Mike Ferry event, or, a Joe Stump event, or, if I just got done reading a great business book, I'll sit down and I'll send, my realtors out the business book and say, hey, I would love to get to go to lunch with you and talk about this. I love business development, and so when I do spend time with my real estate agents, I'm helping them, build their business, build their databases, talking to them about the Client for Life strategies and what can they do, to create Client for Life. Because most realtors, they do the same thing. Once they help Mr. and Mrs. Smith get into a home, they don't continue to market and build that relationship. And so we talk about strategies like that.
Yeah, and of course with realtors, it's even more important to them because they're not working as many deals. So every client that they have is precious.
Exactly.
Well,
John, I don't mean to cut us off.
Oh no,
we can continue the conversation at another time, but unfortunately, my first client has shown up.
All right. Well, that's money in your pocket, and that's a good time to end it. I'm just looking at the tape anyway. We're running near the end of the tape, so it's a good time to end this. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It was just wonderful. As I said, I've heard you talk, and I encourage everybody out there, because most people do get the Mortgage Originator magazine, and they can see your schedule and when you talk all over the country. And I have seen you. I think you're absolutely fabulous. If you remember, after your talk, I went up and told you so, and I just think it's great. Anyway, that about wraps it up.
And for record, John, if there's anybody that has any questions, I would love to be able to answer any questions. So feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to respond back. Any questions and helping people.
Well, that's nice of you. And when we do put this up on the web, we do put your email address.
Good.
And a lot of people like Duffy Gilligan, they just get tons of emails. So, be careful what you wish for.
There you go.
Anyway, thanks so much, Tom.
Have a great one.
Okay, bye now.
Holiday.